online about why do you meditate? And that was such an interesting question. Why meditate? People really don't understand that meditation is probably the most powerful thing that you can do as a human being. And when I say powerful, I don't mean to invite your ego into the conversation and say, oh, I want power, I need power. It's not about that kind of power. I mean the power to impact you in a way that you could not even imagine. We are in this mind-identified state. I want to see your faces a little more. Okay. We are in this mind-identified state, and we are in this nasty habit of wanting to understand everything intellectually, which just keeps us really trapped in the mind, in this constant state of figuring it out. Most people who come to the Peaceful Mind Center, we come together here because we're suffering, struggling in some way, or were. My teachings come from my own struggling and my own suffering in my life. And that's what pushes us onto this spiritual path, is we say, hey, there must be a way to not struggle, not suffer. I look around me and I see people that aren't struggling with things that I'm struggling with. I look around me and I see that I'm not struggling with some things that they're struggling with. So what's going on here? Clearly this is, this suffering is different for everyone. So how do I figure out how to have the life I want and how to not suffer and struggle? And then come lots of times this insatiable consumption of self-help books. I have tons of them at home. If you need to borrow any, I have them all. But you begin to realize that starts to be a bottomless pit. It's really it can be useful, in the beginning on a cognitive level to get your feet on the ground and sort of satisfy your mind a little bit. Stop perhaps some very dysfunctional, some very painful behavior and understand cognitively. But cognitively, you will only be dealing with mind on the level of mind. And so what you'll probably have found throughout your life is that you have been found these moments where you're able to satisfy your mind for a moment, right? And then what happens? It goes away, right? It changes again. Life changes, things change, and then your mind is not satisfied again. And that's the dance that we kind of end up in, and not really understanding why we never really hit some real pay dirt, some real lasting sense of peace. Because that peace, that happiness, is a mind-based happiness. And mind-based happiness is dependent on things being the way that your mind thinks they should be. And when things are the way your mind thinks they should be, you notice relief. Your mind is satisfied for a moment. But then what happens? Things change because everything is bound to impermanence and change. And then your mind is not satisfied again. So there's no real sense of real happiness. It's just temporary, where your mind is for a moment satisfied and then your mind is not satisfied. You experienced this, right? Very familiar? Okay. So there is dealing with mind on the level of mind. It's all very cognitive. It's all the self-help stuff, all the psychiatry, psychology, all of that stuff. And parts of that can be useful. But ultimately, what we're here to do here is transcend the mind. What does it mean to transcend the mind? And please speak into the mics. I don't think they're on, but What does it mean to transcend the mind?
To go beyond thought.
To go beyond thought. To go beyond thought. Now the hard part for most of us here is that we have been thinking for as long as we can remember. And it's just been thought. And we have become identified with that thought process, believing that thinking to be us. Okay? It's not you. Thoughts are not required for you to be human. If thoughts stopped in your mind for 10 seconds, would you disappear? Something would remain, right? Something would still be here. Something would be aware that thoughts are not present in this moment. And that is you. That is the self. The self that is aware. But that self cannot be defined. That self is not a concept. That self is not an idea. That self is ineffable. And so the problem is everything we understand about ourself and about the world is a conceptual understanding. But the mind cannot conceptually understand the self. The self can see the mind very plainly, just like the nose on your face. But the mind can never comprehend the self. The mind comprehends everything through its programming, its coding. You know, we talk about like C++ or whatever they use to code computers, the language that they code computers. Well, the language that coded your computer is English. That's your code. And your whole world exists in that code till I show up. Then I blow that all up. And your ego doesn't like that very much. Your ego is not going to like me. Because even your idea of yourself is not real.